Yelan, the latest 5-star introduced into Genshin, a Hydrovision user, and even though she uses a bow, she reminds us a bit of a short blue-haired sword guy we all love as support. Today, we'll be looking into Yelan, everything you need to know, Kit explained, her best artifacts, weapons, and much more. We will also discuss if she really is just another Xinqiu, or if she does bring more into the table. If you want to skip ahead into something you're not sure about, I'll be leaving the timestamps in the description below. So, without further delay, let's begin. For a quick overview for Yelan, we'll be looking at her base stats at level 80 compared to every other bow user, as well as all talent levels at 8. So in the background footage you'll be seeing a Yelan at level 80, as well as talents 888. So, starting with her HP, it is actually the highest out of any bow user, starting at 12,749. Her attack is slightly below average at 215, and her defense is actually the lowest out of any bow user, at 483. Keep in mind that these stats can quickly change due to the artifact she is using or the weapon she has as well. So for the materials needed for Phase Ascension 5, which is the Phase Ascension we're going to be working with, and this will also upgrade her crit rate, you're going to need 1 Varonata Lazarite Silver, 9 fragments, and 9 chunks. You're also going to need 18 Recruit Insignias, which is dropped by killing any of the Fatui members. Along with this, you're also going to need 30 Sergeant Insignias and 12 Lieutenant Insignias. You're also going to need 108 Star Conches, which can be found in the eastern beaches of Leeway connecting to Dragonspine, which includes Guyan Stormforest as well. And for the boss material required, you're going to need 26 Runic Fangs, which is dropped by the latest boss, the Ruined Serpent. And for Phase Ascension 6, you're going to need 6 gems, 20 fangs, 60 more Star Conches, and 24 more Lieutenant Insignias. And for talent materials, this is just to get 1 talent from level 1 to level 8. So, for this, you're going to need 6 Recruit Insignias, 22 Sergeant Insignias, and 10 Lieutenant Insignias. You're also going to need Prosperity Books, which is obtained in the Taishan Mansion on Mondays, Thursdays, and Sundays. You're going to need 3 Teachings, 21 Guides, and 10 Philosophies. And finally, you're going to need 2 Glided Scales, which is obtained in the Astaha Challenge. The cost for this will be 502,500 Mora. This is to get 2 talents to level 8, and this is for 3 talents to level 8. Her normal attack, Stealthy Bow Shot, has a very short combo, having a total of 4 hits in total. Here's her attacks in 4 different angles. And here's in slow motion. Her first hit does slightly below average damage at 69.5%. Her second hit deals 66.7, which is also below average. And her third hit is also slightly below average as well at 88.2%. And her final fourth hit does a double 55.6% damage, which totals at 111.2% damage, which is high. Her aim shot is at 75% damage, which isn't special since all bow users are at 75% damage aim shot. And the same could be applied at her fully charged shot at 198%. But Yelan has a special charged shot, which is the Breakthrough Charge Shot. To trigger this, you simply have to be out of combat for 5 seconds. You can tell if it's ready by paying attention to Yelan's right wrist for her lifeline, which will glow brightly when the breakthrough shot is ready. Don't worry, it's not literally her lifeline, just the name of the skill that we're gonna get to in a bit. Anyways, this charge shot will not deal a fixed amount of damage, but instead will deal damage based off your max HP. At level 8, it will deal 18.52% of your HP, which is hard to say if it's good damage since it will depend how much HP your Yelan has. This special charge shot also has a very small AoE as well. Plunge, low, and high damage is 97.1%, 194, and 243%, which is technically below average, but all bow users deal the same plunge damage except Child, who does slightly more damage than the rest. And for Yelan's skill, Lingering Lifeline has 2 different versions, tap and hold. Tapping her skill will make her dash forward and entangle enemies in her way with her lifeline, which will then immediately explode, dealing Hydro damage. However, holding her skill will give you much more control over this. Once you hold her skill, she will continue to run at quite a fast speed, and you entangle enemies with her lifeline by going near them in this state. Once her duration is over, or if you decide to end it sooner by clicking her skill again, the lifeline will explode, dealing Hydro damage as well. And for every enemy marked by her lifeline, she will have a 34% chance of resetting her breakthrough shot once they explode, which the game will tell you by showing the symbol when it happens. The cool thing about this rapid state is that not only she runs faster than a normal sprint, but it doesn't consume stamina either, making this skill quite useful for open world exploration too. Her skill damage is also based off her max HP, and at level 8, we have her skill doing 36.18% damage based off her max HP. The duration if you hold her skill is 3 seconds, and the cooldown for both the tap and hold versions is the same, which is at 10 seconds, so it's highly recommended to use the hold version much more often. And now for Yelan's burst, which is called the Death Clarion Dice, which will focus more onto support damage. What this does when it is activated, she will deal AoE Hydra damage, which afterwards, she will create her Exquisite Throw, which is this dice over here, and will follow the active character around during its duration. Every time your active character does a normal attack, this dice will launch 3 Hydra attacks to that enemy called Exquisite Throw, which also does damage based off Yelan's max HP. And at level 8, this Exquisite Throw will deal 7.8% of Yelan's max HP. The duration of her burst is 15 seconds and the cooldown is 18 seconds as well, and the energy cost leans a little bit on the expensive side, at 70 energy required for her burst. For Yelan's first passive, Turn Control, obtained after getting her first Ascension, increases her HP based off different elements in your party. Basically, when your party has 1, 2, 3, or 4 different element types, Yelan's max HP is increased by 6%, 12%, 18%, or 30% at 4 different elements. So if you want to get the absolute max of her being a DPS, it's highly recommended to go a full team without anyone using the same element. Her second passive, Adapt with Ease, unlocked after the 4th Ascension, so long as an Exquisite Throw is in play, your own active character deals 1% more damage. This increases by a further 3.5% damage every second. The maximum increase to damage dealt is 50%, but the pre-existing effect will be dispelled if Death Clarion Dice is recast during its duration. And for her final passive, Necessary Calculation, Yelan will give 25% more rewards when dispatched on a Leeway expedition for 20 hours. For talent priorities, we will be discussing the best talents to level up first, and which ones you can maybe leave in order to avoid you spending your hard-earned Mora and other resources, because it does get very expensive to level up a character. So for the first talent you should be leveling up first is her burst. Whether you're building her as support or any type of DPS, her burst is what makes her shine the most, since having Hydra damage be dealt with any of your active characters can greatly help into increasing your elemental damage. And for the second priority, you should be focusing on getting her skill up as well. Very useful if you don't have anyone to group them up in a place where enemies are quite separated, like in the later floors of the Abyss. And for the last talent you should be leveling up is her normal attack. This doesn't have to be up there with your skill or burst, but it can still be quite useful. As we've seen before, her normal attack doesn't do that much damage, so what we are aiming for is her breakthrough shot. This can deal pretty good damage, but to be honest, it really isn't that reliable when it comes to consistency. You want to get that initial shot out of the way when you first get into combat with Yelan, so you have a chance to reset it with her skill to fire it again. That alone makes me say you can go easy with her normal skill and focus on it last, since you're not always guaranteed that shot back. For Yelan's first constellation, enter the Plotters. Lingering Lifeline, which is her skill, gains 1 additional charge. Very useful if you want to do more damage sooner and reset that breakthrough shot as well. And it will also be helpful to travel to places even quicker. Personally, I do think this leans a little bit on the worth it side since her skill is really good, but we'll get back into this later on in the weapons section. Her second constellation, Taking All Comers, when her Exquisite Throw conducts a coordinate attack, it will fire an additional water arrow that will deal 14% of Yelan's max HP as Hydra damage. This effect can trigger once every 1.8 seconds. Now this is the constellation you want if you want to branch out her DPS capabilities into a much stronger one. She can definitely still hit hard without it, but this is one up stat. This is only worth it if you have enough resources for this. And what I mean by this is money. But don't worry too much about this because, like I said before, her C0 is quite strong. And her third constellation, Beware of the Trickster's Dice, increases her burst level by 3, with the max upgrade level being 15. And her fourth constellation, Bait and Switch, increases all party members' max HP by 10% for 25 seconds for every opponent marked by Lifeline when the Lifeline explodes. A maximum increase of 40% max HP can be attained this way. Now this just makes her much more powerful than she already was before. I'm a little surprised this is a C4 since in my opinion, it is very powerful. But in the end, you don't need constellations of a limited 5-star. It's important to remember that Yelan at C0 is already pretty strong. Her C5, Leader Slight, increases her skill level by 3 with the max level being 15. And her final 6 constellation, Winner Takes All, after using Death Clarion Dice, Yelan will enter a Mastermind state. In this state, all of Yelan's normal attacks will be special breakthrough barbs. These breakthrough barbs will have similar abilities to normal ones, and the damage dealt will be considered charge attack damage, dealing 156% of a normal breakthrough barb's damage. The Mastermind state lasts 20 seconds and will be clear after Yelan fires 5 arrows. Now unsurprisingly, this is extremely strong, but at C6, not a lot of people will see this, so don't worry too much about thinking that you need it. Actually, don't ever think that you need a C6 5-star. Yelan has quite a handful of weapons that can be very useful for her. We'll be going over the top 3 5-star weapons, as well as the top 3 4-star weapons in case you don't have any of the 5 stars. So for the top 5-star recommendation is the Aqua Simulacra. Second set is crit damage, and the passive ability for this is your HP being increased by 16% at R1. When there's enemies nearby, damage dealt is increased by 20% at R1 as well. This is the most recent 5-star weapon release, and this suits Yelan very perfectly, increasing her HP, damage dealt, and even crit damage. I can see this weapon be useful for some other people as well. For the second 5-star choice we have is the Polar Star. Second set is crit rate, and to explain the passive simply, basically, both skill and burst damage is increased by 12% at R1, and after doing pretty much any type of attack, you will gain a special stack that will last for 12 seconds with a max of 4 stacks. At R1 your attack will increase by 10% in the first stack, and up to 48% in the fourth stack. This will apply independently to each of your attacks as well, so your skill may be at the second stack, while your burst is at the fourth. It's definitely a little complicated to keep track of this, but it can be useful to increase Yelan's skill and burst damage as well. And for the final 5-star choice we have is the Elegy for the End. This is the weapon I'm using on her, so I can show you how it works personally. Second set is Energy Recharge, and the passive increases Elemental Mastery by 60 at R1. Once skill or burst attack hits enemies, you will gain a special stack, which will orbit around you. It can be triggered once every 0.2 seconds, and when you get to the fourth stack, it will all be consumed and it will give you another effect that will last 12 seconds. This effect will increase Elemental Mastery by 100 at R1 and attack by 20%. The cooldown for this passive is 20 seconds. Yeah, so far this weapon is cool on Yelan. You don't gotta worry too much about energy recharge, and that increase to Elemental Mastery is great, making it a much more heavy hitter in elemental reactions. And now for the 4 stars. The first choice for a 4-star bow for Yelan is the Favonius Warbow. Second set is Energy Recharge, and the passive for this weapon is that crit hits will have a 60% chance to generate a small amount of elemental particles, which can only happen once every 12 seconds at R1. This is very helpful if you want to dedicate Yelan into getting more HP instead of sacrificing an entire artifact for energy recharge. For the second 4-star choice we got is the Fading Twilight. Second set is Energy Recharge, and the passive will increase damage dealt based off a max of 3 stacks. At R1, it will increase damage by 6% on the first stack and 14% at the third stack. The stack can be triggered once every 7 seconds and can be triggered by dealing any type of attack. It's very helpful that this stack can also be triggered while the user is not on the field. It can definitely help Yelan with that energy recharge and can be a decent weapon for her skill and burst, although it will take a little bit to get to that max stack. But if you don't have the Warbow, this can be your best bet, and get it while it's still hot, since this bow is only available for this current event, with the ability to get it to R5 as well of course, so don't sleep on it if you're looking for something for Yelan. And the final 4-star choice we got is the Sacrificial Bow. Second set is Energy Recharge, and after using the skill, you have a 40% chance at R1 to end the cooldown, which can happen once every 30 seconds. This is something you can use to kinda cheat and have a more budget version of her C1. Especially at higher refinement levels, if you have this bow, then you sure as hell do not need a C1 Yelan. For artifacts, we'll be discussing Yelan's best sets, as well as the main stats and substats suiting her for different playstyles. So starting off, one of the best sets you can put on her is the 2-piece Tenacity of the Millilith and the 2-piece Heart of Death. The Tenacity 2-piece will increase your HP by 20%, and the Heart of Death 2-piece set will increase your Hydra damage by 15%. This will help Yelan as a DPS, since most of her attacks scales off her max HP, and that Hydra boost will also help with her skill and burst, as well as her breakthrough shot. But if you want more of a support set, one of the best sets you can put on her is the 2-piece Tenacity and a 2-piece Noblesse Oblige, which 2-piece set increases burst damage by 20%. Both of these sets will be very useful if you want a Yelan that's more dedicated to support, without worrying too much about Yelan's damage for herself. Another popular set choice for support is a 2-piece Emblem of Severed Fate, which will increase energy recharge by 20%, and a 2-piece Noblesse Oblige. Energy recharge will be greatly helpful since, as seen before, if you want to get the most out of her, you will want your entire team to have different elements, not leaving room for another Hydra character to have as a battery. So unless you have someone capable of generating neutral white energy particles, then this set is a go-to. People are also recommending a full 4-piece Emblem of Severed Fate. which with the 4-piece increases her burst damage by 25% of energy recharge with a max of 75%. I'd say only go for this if you truly have a good amount of energy recharge. In my opinion, even with this set at the closest to its max potential, it has come up quite lackluster in my opinion, because I tested it. I've been rocking the Elegy for the end with a 2-piece Wanderer's Trope with a harder dev as well, and while having the 4-piece emblem slightly higher in crit damage and very high in energy recharge as well, it simply couldn't get anywhere near the damage I had when it came to elemental reactions, which is something you want to be able to do properly with the way her burst works. I wouldn't really recommend Wanderer's Trope anyway. It increases elemental mastery by 80 by the way. I'm only using it because I didn't have anything much better, and with the Elegy, I was able to exaggerate my elemental mastery through the roof and push it even further with proper team members. It's a fun thing to try with the Elegy, but then again, a lot of people will never see this weapon. And for main stats, if you want to support Yelan with a bit of DPS capabilities, you will want her stance to be HP %, Goblet as Hydra damage bonus, and either a crit rate or crit damage hat. This will help Yelan obtain a good balance of between damage and support. But if you're struggling to get her burst up frequently, then you can change her stance into an energy recharge one, pushing more into the support side. Although you'll be sacrificing a little bit of damage, the upside is that you will be able to get her burst out much more frequently. And finally, for the substats, you will want to have both crit rate and crit damage, as well as HP % and energy recharge. If you don't want to focus your stance into energy recharge, you can try to squeeze it into a substat, and vice versa. The great thing about Yelan is that her burst makes her be really compatible with pretty much just anyone in Genshin, so we're going to be looking at a lot of compatible characters. If you're watching me for the first time, I have this system where I pick out the best teammates for whoever I'm making the guide about, which this time is Yelan, and choose a handful of compatible characters for her, which then you can mix and match in your own team instead of just recommending one team. I have this system specifically if you don't have a certain character or if you just don't like playing them. Yelan is a special case however. As seen before, her HP increases depending on how many different elements are active in your party. So to get the most out of her, you want to avoid repeating the same elements as much as possible. I personally recommend to repeat an element just once if you really have to, since it can be a bit tricky to have everyone using a different element while making the max use out of everyone's skill. So keeping Yelan as support or even sub DPS in mind, a few good pyro DPSs are useful, first one being Xiangling. Her burst is what's mainly going to be doing the damage, and paired up with Yelan's burst, be prepared to vaporize everything. Literally. Especially if you're applying Hydra once her burst is active, because Vaporize does slightly more damage if Hydra is the one being applied to Pyro, instead of the other way around. Another good choice is Hu Tao. With her skill infusing her attacks with Pyro, you can expect heavy damage to enemies if used along Yelan. But if you don't have Hu Tao, and kinda lost a few 50-50s, then Diluc is a good choice too. His burst allows him to do some Pyro infused hits, and goes pretty well with Yelan. And finally, we have Yoimiya, who can also infuse her normal attacks with Pyro, and after she's done with that and has her burst available, she can activate that and add even more off-field support damage for your next character, even though it's not the best. Most of the Pyro characters we talked about had to depend on being on the field with their infused hits, but here on Electro support, we have more characters with more off-field support capabilities. Pair this up with Yelan while having a good Pyro DPS, and whoever's getting hit by like 5 things at once is probably not gonna make it to the second hit. So for the first Electro pick we have is the Raiden Shogun. Activating her skill not only adds another off-field attack, but can also slightly increase her character's burst damage, so be sure this is active before using anyone's burst. Also, her burst is quite a heavy hitter if done right, so not only she can be a good support, she can be the main DPS as well, since she can take advantage of those electro charge hits. Coming in second is Yae Miko. With her ability to have 3 turrets active at once, you can cover a pretty large area with them. But if you don't like how vague her skill's aim could be, Fisher could be your next pick. Not only she's able to precisely choose where she wants to summon her bird, Oz, but if you accidentally make enemies too far away from his reach, she can simply resummon him to a new location as long as his duration is active. Pretty helpful and maybe a little bit more popular since she's been in the game longer and has been given a free copy to everyone early in the game's lifespan. Lisa can also help with those off-field attacks as well if you don't have any of the mentioned characters. Being able to freeze enemies while using Yelan is also highly efficient and fun since enemies can't do anything to you. So coming in first is Ayaka. Since she can infuse her hits with Cryo, she can freeze enemies up for quite some time alongside Yelan's burst. Rosaria can also work pretty similarly. While can't infuse her hits with Cryo, her burst does leave an area where it can freeze multiple enemies at once, to set up an additional elemental attack or just to keep an entire group of enemies frozen. Changyun can also function pretty similarly, and his skill could help even further if you want to infuse other characters' attacks with Cryo. And finally, we have his Kaya. a character given to everyone in the game and honestly is kinda slept on. His burst acts similarly to Xiangling, where cryo icicles circle around him. Some other mentions I like to put up as well is Sucrose and Venti. Both can group up enemies together. Sucrose boosts elemental damage, and Venti can group up enemies quite tightly so you can get a good value out of your breakthrough shot. Noelle and Zhongli are also a good fit if you don't want to repeat elements but can't decide who to choose. While they can't get much out of Yelan's burst, extra protection will always be useful. Of course, we can't forget Bennett, if all you're looking for is boosting her damage. And finally, we have a Xinqiu. I know it's a little bit weird to include another Hydro character, but doing at least like 6 different attacks per hit is pretty fun to do and could deal a lot of damage. Try it. As I said before, this is a mix and match system. You can pick any character from here and they will work just fine with each other. Although as I said before, try not to repeat elements if you want to get the most out of Yelan. Well, let's get to the actual question. Is she just another Xinqiu? Well, obviously, it's easy to see that she shares something similarly to him, besides the haircut. But to say that she's exactly like Xinqiu, that's just wrong. While she does help out in the same way as Xinqiu, in my opinion, she can be much more than that. She can be a good sub DPS as well. I wouldn't say main DPS since her regular hits doesn't do that much damage, and it feels kinda pointless to use her charge attacks, because why use it when you can just try to use her skill to reset that breakthrough shot, which deals more damage and is far faster to charge up. And when we think about their skills, we often just use Xinqiu's skill to charge up his burst, while on the other hand, Yelan can be used to deal quite a heavy blow, as well as having a chance to reset her breakthrough shot. Not only that, we can also use it to get to places quicker. But is she worth pulling for, or should you skip her? I mean, if I'm being real, pull if you like her. If you're forcing yourself to be a meta slave, then it's okay, you do you. But if you really like someone, then you should just go for it. But if you really had to decide, I'll say, in my personal opinion, to pull her under certain conditions. Which first, if you're straight up unlucky as fuck, like high AR level and you don't have a C6 Xinqiu, or don't even have him at all, which then, I'd probably recommend to pull for her. But if you have at least C2 Xinqiu, then you can skip her. Because looking at both characters at C0, Yelan simply takes the cake. They both got the same burst duration, Yelan's cooldown is slightly shorter, and her energy cost is slightly cheaper too. But later on at C2, Xinqiu just gets more and more benefits, like an extra attack and a longer burst duration. I'm not saying if you have a C2 Xinqiu and beyond that you have to skip her. She can still serve pretty good, if not better than him if built right. But she's definitely worth pulling for if you want to have both a support and sub DPS package into one, to free up space in your party for somebody else you want. It also wouldn't hurt to have a great Hydra support for both sides in the Abyss, since a lot of people have a fully built team on one side and a much weaker team on the other. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, you can show it by leaving a like. If you want more guides like this, click the little red box over here and subscribe. If you want more guides on the other 5 stars, here's a full playlist right here. Thanks a lot for watching the whole way through. I really appreciate it. It does take a fat minute to research the entire thing, pick up the small details not described properly, and edit it. Anyways, thanks again for watching my guide, and I will see you next time.